Here on the Grace Rates podcast, we draw on our personal stories, examine the truth of God's Word, and identify the lies, false identities, and unbiblical beliefs that keep us from walking wholeheartedly in the power of our new life through the gift of grace in Jesus. Join us as we share what it is to walk in relationship with Jesus, where we discover new life in death and step into the supernatural power of God's grace and glory. Hello, Emily. I am so glad to have you here on the podcast with me. To those of you who are listening for the first time maybe, or coming back, I have started a new podcast series where I am interviewing people and giving them a chance to share their personal testimonies. And I am so excited to have Emily with me today. Her story is so powerful and so amazing. And it's really fun because I got connected with Emily Carney randomly back in December, like a year ago, right? Like
Yeah, I think it's
2023.
been about a year. Yeah, 2023, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I bought a sweater from her and we just met up and she told me this crazy story about how she knew me and it was just incredible and so mind-blowing. And so I want her to have the opportunity to share that with you guys here. I actually met Emily's son before I met Emily, and I didn't know how they were connected. But back in 2023, I was in a car accident, and those things happen. And I was sharing in episode 8, the old and the new, which you can go back and reference, just how the Lord had been working in and through that and the challenges of that experience for me, because I was injured and it was the second car accident I had been in. And so it was just bringing up a lot of things, and the Lord really used that in my life to sharpen and shape me spiritually. Like, it was a very challenging for a while because I had to face some really hard emotions and truths about what that means to walk through suffering, to not have an answer, to not know how God's using that for his good, or why he would allow something to happen again after you'd already recovered and kind of dealt with it. It's like, okay, but actually, do you actually believe what you said? Like, has this growth taken root and shaped your life truly? And we see that when we're called to kind of relook at what we were doing and what we were walking through. So, Emily, I'm so glad to have you here. I'm so
I'm
tickled
so
that
glad to be here.
I'm so excited for you to share your story. How did you get acquainted with me?
Well, thank you for having me first. Back in April of 2023, my newly licensed teenager FaceTimed me in a panic, and he had, some blood on his face, and I knew that he'd been in a car accident on his way to school. I knew it immediately. And he was okay, but he was shaken and he was worried about the woman that he had hit, rear-ended. And I immediately got in the car and rushed to where he was. And, he shared with me that he had, come over to the vehicle and checked, and that, you had said something to the effect of my neck. I think something's wrong with my neck. And he was very concerned. He was very shaken. We had him checked over. He was okay to leave with me. But we knew that you were leaving in an ambulance. And for him and I, that was a very scary moment.
Yeah.
To know my kid was okay was great, but to know that you might not be okay, and he was very worried, and they would not allow us to approach you or the vehicle or the ambulance or whatever. So we got him situated, and I am an individual that I'm people would say I'm an empath, and I care deeply about people, and I was very worried and concerned. And so, but for the sake of insurance purposes and everything, I had been told I was not allowed to reach out, which was very hard for me,
I cannot
because
even imagine.
your husband had been at the scene, and I, had seen car seats in the back of your car. My heart was heavy, not knowing if you were okay and not being able to figure out if you were okay.
Right.
And again, we weren't allowed to reach it, like in church, we weren't allowed to reach out. So it was very hard for me. I kept battling with it, back and forth. I'm going to reach out. I don't care what the insurance says. I'm going to reach out. And on the police report, your name was there. So in the age of technology, I did a little digging, and I found you on Facebook. And then I saw you had a podcast. And I decided, like 2 weeks later, or maybe it was longer than that, to listen to the podcast episode. And the episode that I listened to was, as you referred to, episode 8. And I was not expecting to have that episode be the episode that you explained the accident.
Right.
However, the way that you talked about it and the way that you talked about, and I specifically remember, you talked about how through your journey through the previous car accident, where you were then versus where you are now. And I mean, you explained going to the hospital and all the things. And I, but then you pivoted, I mean, you shifted it, and it was about how God in your life has created a space for you to handle it differently, for you to walk through it differently. You talked about, at that point it's spring, and you had, I think, baby chickens or baby ducks,
I think I
and
had baby ducks that year.
you were talking about sitting on your steps, and um, it's emotional for me because it was a moment where you were talking about being thankful, having gratitude, and knowing that you were giving it to him and you were going to be okay. And I was so moved by that podcast because in my life, I have never fully given it to God. I
Mm-hmm.
have always had a belief. I have always been interested in it and intrigued by it, but I have never fully embraced faith. And I've been through suffering. And I've always been a person who, you know, it's almost been 14 years, but I, lost back to back pregnancies that were fairly far along. And then my mother passed away after a horrible battle with cancer. And it was a very, sad and traumatic time. But then we had Adele, and Adele is my now 13-year-old daughter who it wasn't really referred to much as rainbow baby back then, but that was what she was. And her middle name is Faith. And the reason her middle name is Faith is because that is what we felt, my husband and I, got us through. But I still didn't understand it. I still didn't quite understand it. And when I listened to your podcast, I did.
Hmm.
And at that moment, I was ready to reach out. Again, wasn't supposed to, so I didn't. And but at that moment, I started praying more. You have a lot of anxiety when your teenager is driving, especially if he's already been in an accident. And it was causing me real anxiety anytime he was out and about. And I finally just said, just pray, just give it to God. And I did. And so that moment was like a pivotal moment for me to really start leaning into my faith, my relationship with God. Fast forward to, I listened to a few more episodes of the podcast, and I think you said December, November or December, and I had posted some sweaters for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and you were the first person to reach out about the sweaters, and I thought that's really strange. And at that point, I didn't know if you knew who I was, and I was going to meet you to give you the sweaters, and I was really torn, like, do I share this with her? Like, she might hate me. She might not want me to share this with her. She may be upset that my son hit her in a car accident, even though I knew at this point that the insurance claim was settled and everything was all set. And I had listened to your podcast, so I knew you were okay. Um, but the second I saw you, it was I couldn't even stop it. I said, I have to tell you how I know you, and what knowing you and what this instance has done for me. And then that was that. And I told you, and your reaction and response just proved more to me that I wasn't just making any of this up, that I wasn't, just using something false as a coping mechanism, that it was
Right.
actually real, that it was actually meant to be, that it was something that he himself had put in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And our first conversation, and then that was kind of it. We've subsequently had multiple conversations. I have, you know, I purchased my own Bible, my own first Bible for the first time, and I took a while to pick it out because I wanted it to be something that I really love, and I do, and I really love it. And I pray, and It's not a perfect relationship. I'm still in that. I'm not sure what the term for, I know some people like constructing, or I'm not sure what the term is, but I'm still like building that relationship
Yeah.
with God. But that is how we came to know each other. And for me, it was meant to be. That was the direction. And that's a hard thing when you're going through something tough to think about.
Mm-hmm.
This was meant to be. And I had experienced that, and I had verbalized it out loud as I would tell people that I've always been a bit of a positive motivational. Yes, I suffered massive losses, but look at my life. I grew up in a household where we might not have grown up Christian per se, but we had beliefs and we were spiritual, and it was a lot about being mindful and being thankful and having gratitude and having perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always practiced it per se, but this is the first time in my life that I've really felt it.
Right.
And
You can go through the
so, yeah,
motions, right? Like even like there's this whole neurology report about how like when you are thankful and you are taking the time to be grateful, it's impossible for you to feel anxiety at the same time or worry. And so we can go through like these motions of doing something that results in something else. So like chemically, if our brains are developed, that if we can um, intentionally practice gratitude, intentionally practice positivity, we're going to have that natural result of not being as anxious or as worried or as bogged down by what is happening in our life. But just like what you're saying, like the difference in genuine faith and genuine relationship with the Lord is that it's not just something that we are doing that's producing it. There's a deeper change that's happening and changing us from the inside out. It's like, it's the thing that causes the peace and that like ability to truly just let go and to breathe, like
yeah,
that rest and respite. It's less work somehow in the
it
process of
is.
it.
It really is. And I think that I'm a worrier by nature, especially about my kids and life. And it has eased that for me. And not just in the practice, the daily practice of being thankful and gratitude and discipline and all the things that I already kind of did, but it's in my heart. It's a
Mm-hmm.
little, and that's, it's not an easy conversation to have with a lot of other people in your life that maybe aren't going through the same journey. So again, when I heard that first podcast, I felt connected. I felt, oh, like, wow, that's how I feel, and oh my gosh, that just reaffirms how I'm feeling. And it has opened me up to, like I said, reading the Bible. I read a wonderful book. I think it's called Uninvited, or
Mm-hmm.
and Lisa Grossman,
I think so.
maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is wonderful. I listened to the audiobook and I read it. And it just the relationship part of, the relationship with God. Um, just it really is meaningful. It really is uninvited, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's Uninvited, Feeling Loved When You Feel Less by Lisa Terskit. I'm definitely saying that wrong. Apologize. My cat just ran through the room.
That's okay.
Yeah, so she has a book out, and yeah, this looks really great. I haven't read this, but it is a New York Times bestseller.
I recommend it highly, especially if you're in the beginning processes of really kind of establishing your relationship with God. And I mean, it's a lot about her testimony, but um, she gives you work a little bit. She gives you things to work on, and
Mm-hmm.
but in a light way, not in a heavy way. Nothing, and so, like I said, and I believe, even though it is very much about her relationship with God and religion and so forth, I believe that anybody could. I mean, I recommended it to multiple of my friends who are not, in this space that I'm in, but in life in general. I feel like it's very helpful. And like you said, you can practice gratitude and being thankful, which does help. I mean, I read that. I
Mm-hmm.
read that neurology report. It was you know, one of the first things that I was really focused on. And, but it's feeling it while you're practicing it that really makes a difference.
Right.
Um, and understanding that there's ups and downs with it. I've had moments over the last year that I am not giving it to God and doing the things that I want to do. And but then I have this moment where it's like, oh, okay, yep. And I check myself, and I find my connection a lot to be out in the woods.
Yeah.
That's just where I find. So I hear something say, "Get in the woods, Em. Go ahead," and I do, and I get myself out there, and I feel the sunlight or the air, no matter what the temperature, because it's been cold, but um, and it's like a reconnection. It's like
Yeah.
I hear you, I get it, I need to give it back to you. I'm sorry that I haven't. And I've really found through, and I think the catalyst for me, like you said, was that first podcast episode, but then subsequently, you've had some different ones that were about that it can look different for everybody, that it does not
Yeah.
have to be that you say the exact words
Mm-hmm.
to
There's no
pray,
perfect
that you can,
formula.
no,
There are lots of wonderful examples throughout scriptures of how to pray, and they're not all the same.
yeah,
There's a lot of themes that are similar. In fact, I'm doing a whole study on this right now from the book. Gosh, I don't even have it in front of me. I think it's like Now When You Pray, I think is the book.
okay,
And it's this whole study about the different forms of prayer and different parts of prayer. And it's really beautiful. But the reality is that there is no perfect way. There are ways and things that and as you spend time in the word, you're going to see themes emerge, things that consistently come back up. And those are great models, but God doesn't hear our prayers as an, oh, you didn't fit into this template, so now I'm not going to hear your prayer anymore. Like, that's not how our relationship with the Lord works. He's given very specific directives over certain things. Like, he tells us, the two commandments that he gives us after he comes is to love God with your whole heart and then to love others with your whole heart. And those are specific directives, but there are a lot of other things throughout scripture and in our relationships with the Lord where we are given tools and resources and examples, but we're not given specific like directions on this is exactly how you have to do it. This is exactly what your spiritual discipline should look like. This is exactly what your life should look like on any given day. And I was just like, it's so encouraging even just to hear, you talking about how like you're in this in life, we have these seasons where we forget and we stop practicing the things and doing the things that we should be doing and that we want to do. And that is all of us. It doesn't matter how spiritually mature you are. It is learning to recognize when we're stepping out of line with that actually shows that we are growing in spiritual maturity and that we are allowing the Holy Spirit to lead in our lives and to put us in check. And so the fact
yeah,
that you can hear that and recognize that and be like, oh, okay, like I need to go. I need to go do the thing that
yeah.
allows me to remember what I'm supposed to do before you, which is to give you my life and to let you lead it. Yeah, you shared so many wonderful things. I did want to just backtrack to, I know you talked a little bit about how your upbringing was, you were kind of exposed to faith and things. Is it different now, just beyond like the prayer and just feeling him, but like how do you feel like the Lord has led not just you but your whole family kind of through that season where you had this really scary experience that was out of your control, and how God led that?
Well, I had a wonderful foundation of a family life. I had parents that, again, there was no specific, we're going to go to church or read the Bible or so forth, but there was a spirituality and learning about mindfulness and perspective, and also God. I mean, God was present. And it's interesting because my dad was a bit of a hippie, but he was a bit older, and so there's a part of my dad that leaned very much into the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh and some Buddhist principles, but it was more about the like mindfulness and meditating and that kind of thing. And it was a great foundation. And my mom was, for lack of a better word, who I choose to live like and want to live like more every day. She saw the best in everyone. She had a kindness that rose above any kindness that I know. She was a nurturer, and she just connected with people on a level that was spiritual. And that sounds, well, it isn't, it doesn't sound silly to me. I know that to some it sounds silly, but that foundation and then transforming it into, or not transforming it, but it coming into a faith of, I've always been connected to God. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know how. I didn't know how it worked. I wasn't, but I've always found myself drawn to it. I had been to church a few times with some friends. They were not churches that I felt much in, but anytime someone prays, I weep. I, it's, at the beginning of this, we prayed together, and we weren't even halfway through the prayer, and I'm in tears because I feel connected. Um, so for me, it was a foundation. For me, the losses that we suffered, again, it was about having faith. It was about my mom showing me perspective of, this is a hard journey we're walking through, but look at all of the other hard journeys that people walk through, and we will be okay, and we are okay. It was just like she knew, and she didn't, she was not happy about it, but it was. And then, this traumatic thing with Matthew, um, it really was a moment like, oh, it's really awful that this happened. I mean, the car was totaled. It was a good, safe car. So then it was the whole, it was a mess, and it was nerve wracking, and I think it caused him to be a better driver. I think, because he wasn't doing anything illegal or anything. He just was an inexperienced driver, and just didn't stop in time. And but it really was the moment that I listened to your podcast and listened to what you said about your journey, that it was like everything that my mom had always said to me made sense in a different way. It
Mm-hmm.
made sense in a way of, even if she wasn't fully giving it to God, per se, she had faith. And for me, it was like it was just eye opening, because I
Yeah.
realized what that word faith can mean.
It had a
Um,
source. It wasn't just
it had a
like a
source.
mystic kind of thing. It had a source. It had an
Right.
origin.
Right. Yeah. So yes, so my foundation was a good one, and then it just kind of all clicked.
Mm-hmm.
It all clicked that I didn't have to go to church and pick a certain denomination to have a relationship with God, and it just really helped. It really helped that next season. Yeah. So I think that answers that.
Yeah. So, in other words, you had a really solid foundation. And then through this experience and being able to just kind of have those pieces fit together where it suddenly started to make sense, you found like the source or the origin of your faith and were able to actually like lean into it in a different way that has actually been transformative in your life and actually made changes from the inside out. And then I know like you were talking about a little bit about like how the Lord was kind of like leading you and drawing you even in those years where you didn't have a name for him or didn't understand. And I think that that is such a powerful and beautiful thing. Like there are so many passages in scripture that talk about how he chooses us and he calls us by name and he draws us and he unveils our eyes to know him and to see him. And I think like you've really lived that. That has really been your experience in your life. And as you continue to dive into the word and as you continue to grow in your faith, you were going to see and continue to see those changes in your life. And you're going to continue to experience a more deep and intimate relationship with him. Those things that have been mysterious will start, coming to sense. Like you are going to start being drawn to be in community with other believers. Like there are all these things that will change and grow within you because of the work that the Spirit's doing in you. And I think that that is just such an incredible thing. And a good reminder, like sometimes we aren't there yet, that the Lord hasn't revealed it to us. And sometimes it takes something happening in our life for the Lord to orchestrate those things together. And I think that for me, what has been so encouraging about just being invited into Emily's story is seeing like how the Lord again took this thing that had happened in my life that was hard and used it for not only my own good and helping me to grow spiritually and to have a deeper appreciation and gratitude and love for the Lord, that, even if I don't get better, even if I have to suffer a while longer, even if these things, like you're not going to promise to keep me from being hurt, I still can choose to walk with you and trust that you have a plan and a purpose. And so, I mean, it was a long time late, several months, almost a year later, when you and I met and you had the opportunity to share your story with me. And in that moment, I just remember like hearing it, and I didn't even know how to fully process. Like, I just felt so overwhelmed because all I could think about was those moments, which I shared very honestly on the podcast, where I was like,
Yeah, you
this is
did.
what I want to believe, but I am struggling. This is hard. Like, I don't know how God is going to use this for his good. This doesn't make any sense to me. And, fast forward 8, 10 months, and I'm sitting here buying a sweater from this woman who's sharing how the Lord used this in her life and her family's life, and how their lives have changed and how they are experiencing the Lord. And I just felt very humbled. I really did. That God would, one, I think it's hard to put words to, because on one hand, I think people would be shocked for me to say like I would do it again in a heartbeat, knowing that that is what it produced. Because like who knowingly would be like, oh yeah, I'll just go have this injury that was very, very painful for a long period of time
Right.
because it produced, this fruit in someone else's life. But I think that that is the mark of a believer also. Like, when we are walking in unity with the Lord, suddenly the desires that we have are for the things of his heart, and we long for and want those things because we love him. And I think, again, like, he he uses the craziest things
Yeah.
to work out his glory, and it is incredible that I got to be a part of that in even a small way, having no knowledge that I was. But the Lord uses everything for his good. It makes me think of, as I was kind of just praying, contemplating on it this morning, I thought of the story of Joseph in Exodus. When he was in Egypt, he had been in prison and sold into slavery, and then he was imprisoned falsely. And there were just so many moments of his story where you're like, God, what are you doing? Like, why are you allowing this? And he still chose to live for the Lord. And then his brothers come back, and Joseph is like one of the most revered and high officials in Egypt. And he finally tells his brothers that, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this result, to preserve many people alive. Because if it wasn't for Joseph being in Egypt, so many people would have died because of the famine for 7 years. This is found in Genesis 50:20, by the way. But I'm not comparing myself to Joseph.
No,
But
but the segue, and for me, I've already experienced a lot of that feeling in my life. And a lot of people say, well, it happens for a reason, right? And I never really, that sentence doesn't really, I don't like it, because death and trauma and sorrow are so real, and you don't want to just have somebody say it happened for a reason.
right.
However, it has been 14 years. My mom died in 2011, and we had lost a little boy. I was 25 weeks pregnant. We had lost a little boy within 4 months before my mom died, and my mom had bone cancer, and it was very painful. She had already had breast cancer, and this was 5 years later. Um, and for me, even living through that and living through all of that, and I would say out loud to people years and years, I've always been a sharer. I share my stories. A lot of people in my life are like, I don't know how you have gone through that and you can just talk about it. I don't know either. That's just who I am. And I would say, if I had not lost what I lost in January of 2011, my mom died in April. And I don't know like how that would have gone if I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't, and I would have, and then I had Adele. And I've always said to people, and again, I'm emotional, I've always said to people that she is my sunshine. She is my light. Her name is Adele Faith for a reason. And I would have never had her. And what she has brought to me, like you said, I didn't understand. I knew what I
Yeah.
felt, but I didn't get it. And then it was, why is something telling me that I need to reach out to this woman, that I need to, I mean, I wanted to reach out to know how you were doing, but like, what is driving me to really, I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
stop thinking about it. It was very, and I didn't want to put that too much on Matthew, because, he was 17 at the time. I
Yeah.
didn't need to put my, and then I listened to your podcast, and it was like, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. Because you really, you talk about the idea of, and I don't know what the, like you said, putting the words to it, struggling. You can be struggling and also have faith and
Yeah.
also know that you're okay
Yeah.
and walk through that journey a little differently. And for
Well,
me, that was what it was when
yeah.
you were very real in that podcast, and it was hard as the mom of the kid that hit you, and I knew that you'd had previous injuries, but it still was very, I just, it was hard for me, but at the same time to hear how you were dealing with it, and you were so raw and so real about struggling, but how faith works for you while you're
Right.
struggling. I guess that was what resonated and continues to. So it's not just like it happens for a reason, but it's part of a plan. And I am okay, and I will be okay, and we will be okay. And so
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from what we define as okay, what we define as being like good, because I mean, God uses and can redeem even death. So if he can redeem and use our suffering and death, then really what is there in life that would make us not okay?
no,
If God has a sovereign plan, if God is orchestrating our lives and if there is nothing that is outside of his reach or knowledge or understanding, we don't have to plead our case because he already knows everything that we have been through, everything that we will go through, everything that we are thinking. He knows all of our traumas, all of our triggers. He knows every single thing about us, and he is orchestrating our lives. Now, whether we choose to respond to that faith, whether we choose to respond to his leading is our choice.
yeah,
But for his believers, for his people, for those of us who are responding, he has a hand over our lives. And like in your case, he knew from the day that you were born that you were going to live for him. It may not be until you were, later in your years, but he knew and he orchestrated things and had a timing and a place and a purpose in every part of it. And he's going to continue that, through the rest of your life. And it's the same thing for me, like, and to the point of, our suffering, like he promises in Romans that God works all things together for our good, for his purpose. So he has a purpose, and he has, if we can trust him with that purpose, and we're willing to be used for that purpose, and we're willing to be vessels poured out for him. And I think that I just keep coming back to this like idea, like if we really truly understand and believe in his sovereignness, that then we know we're okay,
yeah,
because we know that we are serving a good and loving God who knows us fully.
yeah, definitely. And I think it's really helped in our day-to-day life, but in big things. And it became something my husband and I leaned into together too. And we, have subsequently tried to some church services. I had been invited. This is another strange, not strange, but God working. Matthew is off to college, and he has met a girl. And through the course of meeting her, I met her mother, and her mother, kind of born and raised Catholic, but is now just kind of diving into really, her relationship with God. And she invited me to a Bible study, and it was a Zoom Bible study. And I joined it on a Thursday evening because I felt God telling me to. It was all women over the age, besides myself and Liliana's mom and maybe one other woman. It was all women over the age of 55, 60. And everything that they shared, everything that we talked about in this hour-long Zoom Bible study, it was as if I had been in a therapy. I mean, it was so therapeutic for me. And really connecting me, everything that we've talked about today, everything that you and I have talked about God and how he works, and it was wonderful. And so as I've continued down this road, again, there are moments where I'm failing and I'm not giving it to God, but then it comes right back.
Yeah.
And I do it again. And, I started a daily practice. I've failed over the last few weeks at my daily practice. I'll, be honest. And like you said, life and everything, but I had a daily practice where the 15 minutes between the time my husband leaves in the morning and the time I start work, I sit with my Bible, and I have like another prayer journal, and I open up the prayer journal and I read the passage of the day, and then I find it in the Bible and I read everything kind of around it.
That's amazing.
I don't know the Bible the way I should. I'm learning. I listen to many different podcasts now. It's kind of the only podcasts that I listen to are podcasts about relationship with God. But then I write about it, and I write about what it means to me, what that passage means to me, what that verse means to me. And that's been a wonderful practice. I need to get back into it. But I also know that that's okay, that he's not gone because
He's not mad at you.
He's not mad at me. And I felt that we are currently in the midst of a bit of a stressful, hard season. We have trying to buy a house, and this again, to most people sounds very cheesy and coincidental, but for our family it really doesn't. And my husband had looked at me one day in the afternoon and had said, I'm just going to look on Zillow and the perfect house is going to be there. And he was being silly. We are now have an offer in on the house because we walked around and every corner was like, there was something gnawing at us telling us that this is the house that we need to buy. This is the house we need to be in.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But it's been both of us reminding each other. There's a lot of stress that goes into buying a house and a lot of anxiousness and a lot of worries. But we've found a way that we can say to each other, he's got us. God's got us. We're gonna let God lead us, because that is currently what we're doing.
Right.
It is the first house and the only house that we have walked in and walked through, and we immediately put an offer on it. And, so, going back to knowing what's okay and knowing you're okay and what that definition is. And I think that is something that I already had a foundation of, and you're right. Maybe he's known from the beginning that I would know him. And I'm just learning that as a 38-year-old mom. He knew that all along, and he's been there all along. And there's been all these things that I've said to my husband, wow, like I've really wanted to be in tune with God for a long time, but I just didn't understand it. So
yeah, and he brought that to you at the right time.
Yeah.
And so now you're in a season where you're gonna just get to grow and experience that, and it's so exciting and so fun to watch. And he'll continue to bring the right people. He'll continue to bring the right resources. But I do want to just say to, like, as a mom myself, I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be in your shoes, and even what Matthew has been through. Like, I don't want to gloss over that either. As a young kid who's learning to drive, like I do fully understand how traumatic that must have been for him. And I just wanted to note here, because I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the podcast, but he was so incredibly respectful and concerned, and I was just so amazed by that, even in the midst of, like, not really sure what had happened and in the state that I was in. So you've got a great kid, and I am just so incredibly happy that the Lord used all of this for his good, even though it was hard for each of us in our own ways. And I just thank him that he knows better than we do, because I don't know that I could have intentionally allow hard things to happen to my kids. We know that it works together for good, but he is so loving and so good that he does allow those hard things so that we can truly be alive, so that we can truly experience him in all of his fullness. So, Emily, thank you so much for coming on and for meeting with me. I was just so blessed to have you on here.
You've been listening to the Grace Raised podcast. Thank you for taking the time to be a part of this conversation. As a crowd-funded project, we rely on your reviews, subscriptions, and help to share this ministry with others. If you were blessed by this episode, please consider subscribing to the show or leave us a review wherever you listen. If you would like to share your story, you can submit a request at our website at thegraceraisepodcast.com/contact us, or send us an email at thegraceraisepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to donate or help support the ministry, you can click the donate link in the show notes or go to graceraisepodcast.com/donate. As always, we are so thankful that you are here and pray that the Lord will continue the good work he has begun in you. Grace be with you all.